Hey there, and welcome. Have you ever tried to organize, say, a surprise party for a friend? Or maybe a big group trip? You had to juggle the budget, figure out everyone's schedules, get them all on the same page, and just make sure it all went off without a hitch. Well, believe it or not, in that moment, you were a manager.
Right? It's a word we throw around all the time, but what does it really mean? It's so much more than just being the boss. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and build a really clear framework for understanding what management actually is, and frankly, why it's so incredibly important. You ready? Let's get into it.
So to start, let's just look at a few classic and very different ways of thinking about this. First up, we've got F.W. Taylor. His whole view is about pure productivity. Just look at the key words here, best and cheapest. For Taylor, it was all about efficiency, getting the most bang for your buck.
But then, check this out. Lawrence Apley comes along and completely flips the script. He says, no, it's not about managing things or assembly lines. It's about growing and developing the people who do the work. I mean, that's a huge human-centric shift in focus, right?
And then you have Mary P. Fullett, who kind of gives us this brilliant blend of the two. She sees it as the art of hitting your goals, but not by doing everything yourself. Nope, it's by empowering and working with your team. And that little phrase, through people, that's everything.
And finally, the legend, Peter Drucker. He gives us this really holistic view. He calls management a multi-purpose organ. Think of it like the brain of the whole operation. It's not just doing one thing. It's this complex function that coordinates every single part of the business, from the big picture strategy all the way down to the daily tasks. Okay, so we've got efficiency, we've got people, we've got collaboration, and this idea of a central brain. So how in the world do we pull all of that together into one single, clear definition? Well, let's do it.
So here it is. This is our working definition. Management is a distinct process, and I love this part. It's both a science, using data and facts, and an art, using intuition, communication, and experience. And at its very core, it's all about 4 key actions: planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, all to hit a specific goal.
Now, those 4 actions we just mentioned, planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, those are the absolute fundamental building blocks of what every manager does. Think of it as their essential toolkit. Let's open it up and take a look at each tool.
And it's so important to see this not just as a to-do list, but as a continuous cycle. It's a loop. A manager plans the journey, organizes the crew and the supplies, leads them on the expedition, and then controls the process to make sure they're staying on course. And the results from that controlling step, they feed right back into the next round of planning.
Okay, first up, planning. This is the thinking phase. It all starts here. It answers the big question, where are we going and how are we going to get there? This is where managers set goals, build budgets, and create strategies. They're literally drawing the map before the journey even begins.
So once you have that map, you've got to get all your resources in order, and that's organizing. This is all about building the structure for success. Who's doing what teams are needed, who reports to whom. You're building the vehicle that will actually take you on the journey.
Next up, leading. And this is so crucial. You can have the best plan and the most perfect structure, but they're useless if nobody's motivated to actually do the work. Leading is where managers communicate that vision, inspire their teams, and guide them along the way. This is the human element, pure and simple.
And finally, we have controlling. This is the feedback loop. This answers the question, are we still on track? It's about monitoring progress, checking your results against the original plan, and, making adjustments when you hit a roadblock. It's the GPS that keeps the whole thing from going off a cliff.
So every manager, everywhere, performs those 4 functions. But, and this is a big but, what they focus on and how they do it really changes depending on where they sit in the organization. So let's break down these 3 distinct levels.
All right, way up at the top, you've got your top management. We're talking about CEOs, presidents, the C-suite. Their eyes are on the horizon, the long-term future. They set the big, overarching vision for the whole company. They're the ones steering the entire ship.
Then you've got middle management. Think of your department heads, your plant managers. Their job is absolutely critical. They act as the bridge. They take that huge, sometimes abstract vision from the top and translate it into actual concrete plans that their departments can execute.
And finally, right there on the front lines, you find lower management. These are your supervisors, your team leads. They are directly in charge of the employees who are doing the actual work.
They manage the day-to-day, even the hour-to-hour, making sure the job gets done right.
Okay, so we know what managers do, those 4 functions, and where they do it, the 3 levels. But how do they actually pull it all off? Well, a great way to think about it is that managers are constantly swapping out different hats, playing different roles depending on what the situation calls for.
And these roles really fall into 3 big categories. Sometimes they're wearing an interpersonal hat, acting as a figurehead, a leader, or a liaison connecting different teams. Other times, it's an informational hat. They're monitoring data, sharing info, or acting as a spokesperson. And then there's the decisional hat, where they're an entrepreneur starting something new, a disturbance handler putting out fires, or an allocator deciding who gets what budget. And to wear all these different hats well, managers really need 3 core skills. Technical skill, knowing the nuts and bolts of the work, is super important for lower managers. Human skill, just being good with people, is absolutely essential at every single level. And conceptual skill, that ability to see the whole chessboard, becomes more and more critical the higher you climb.
So, we built this whole framework, the functions, the levels, the roles, the skills, but so what? Why does any of this really matter? Well, it all boils down to one single incredibly important thing: performance.
And you can really think about performance in 2 ways. First, there's effectiveness. That's about doing the right things, making sure you're working on goals that actually matter. Then there's efficiency, which is about doing things right, using your resources wisely. And here's the key. You can be the most efficient person in the world at a task that is completely pointless. A great manager has to nail both.
So, at the end of the day, that is the ultimate job of management, to achieve high performance. And they do that by creating a system, an environment where the whole team is being both effective, working on the right stuff, and efficient, doing it in the best way possible. That 1-2 punch is what drives real success.
We've covered a ton of ground today, from those 4 core functions to all the different hats a manager wears. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Go into your own workplace and start looking for this stuff. How do you see these functions, these levels, these roles all playing out in real time? It's a pretty fascinating way to see how things really get done. Thanks so much for tuning in.